Let us kick it off by introducing our first sponsor, Ryan Prosser, who is at Very. Hello, Ryan.
Hi, Stacy. Thanks for having us. I'm definitely a fan of the show, so really appreciate the opportunity to sponsor. For those who don't know, Very is a fully distributed IoT engineering firm. We like to say we're distributed by design, not for COVID. So we've been around for 10 years, distributed since before that was a thing. We're a heavy lifting firm. How to know if we're right for you. Our clients come to us with their thorniest questions. So if you're out there, you're like a medium, larger company, you've got something in IoT land, hardware land that you're trying to get done, we're likely would be a good fit to help you with that. We've won virtually every award you can win for engineering excellence, in some cases multiple times, and would love to chat with you if you've got a project in mind. So with that, Stacy, thanks for having us, and back to you.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for sponsoring. That is Very. You can find them at verypossible.com. Okay. And now I am going to introduce Kevin, who will introduce our next panel. So hello, Kevin, co-host and
hello.
Person.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I can't say that I've won a lot of awards, so it's kind of hard to follow up on Ryan there. But yeah, so folks who have, you've probably heard me before on the podcast with Stacy. Unfortunately, today you get to see me. And due to the pandemic and current events, I have 80s hair and just don't care. So you'll have to live with that, unfortunately. But I am looking forward to an awesome discussion. We typically talk a lot about hardware on the show, but today, for this event, we're going to talk about how to deliver a service, not a product. And that means not just hardware, obviously. So to do that, I've got a bunch of awesome guests. So let me introduce them one by one. We have Michelle Chambers-Turner, who is the Senior Director of the Smart Home Ecosystem at Google. Mm-hmm. Welcome.
Thank you.
We have Matt Van Horn, who is the CEO of June Life. And I will disclose that I bought and love my June oven. There he is. And Kieran, we have Kieran Hannon, the Chief Marketing Officer of OpenPath, who's actually worked at a bunch of other companies as well. He's going to bring that perspective in as well. And Kieran, I'm going to forgive you for growing up a Chelsea fan. Just want to say that up front.
That's quite all right, Kevin. I knew you had to give me some grief somehow along the way. So you might as well get it out of the way. Hello, everybody. Good day to you all.
It's all out of the way. It's all out of the way. So, all right. So let's get started. Each of you have brought some type of hardware to the market or multiple hardware products to the market. But I'd like to kind of just have a discussion, and I want to stay out of the way personally as much as possible, about what you think about when you're building a product, because it's not just the product, but it's also the services. So Michelle, why don't we start with you?
Hi, good morning or good day, whichever part of the world you happen to be in right now. So I've been, just for background, I was at Nest for a couple of years, right at the time that Nest was brought into Google, and have been part of Google proper. So it's been about 5 years combined. And when we at Google think about how we bring hardware to market, it needs to be able to do more than just provide a single function to the consumer. We think about whole home experiences, and we're diving into this actually more and more right now. If you look at some of the original Nest products that we did, like the Nest Thermostat and Nest Protect, both the Nest Thermostat and Protect do significantly more than just help you regulate temperature in your home and help you stay safe from carbon or fire alerts. And that's been kind of the premise of what we think about is how do we deliver on more of the experience? How are we thinking about what consumers are actually trying to solve for? In the case of a thermostat, is how do I have a comfortable home? The other thing that we think about a lot, and I spend a lot of time thinking about, is how do we get all these products to work together, right? So in terms of having the ecosystem at Google, one of the things that I spend a lot of time with is partners from all over the world. And we think about how do we get those devices to work together more effectively so that your home is creating solutions for the connected devices in your home, not just a single lighting product or a smart plug or a single oven, right, Matt? And so we think about how do we create those experiences. And the way that those are starting to evolve now is You have smart locks that are working with your alarm system. You have smart garage door openers that can let you know if you left the garage door open when you've left home so that you can close it remotely. All of those things that start to bring you peace of mind, let your home act on your behalf and truly start to be more of a helpful home. And that's what we spend a lot of time thinking about at Google. So how do we enable those devices to orchestrate together to deliver on a bigger promise, kind of the synergistic effect of having more devices in your home?
Right, that's a great point. And Matt, I'm curious how you answer this question or what your thoughts are, because you're more of a single product with a lot of services. It's not a broad portfolio of products, it's more service oriented. So what's the difference that you see in your experience?
So a big part of June's DNA is Apple. So my co-founder Nikhil was the first camera engineer in the iPhone. He's the patents for panorama, tap to focus. And so there's a certain, and Apple is the largest company where people have come to June from the highest percentage of folks that used to work there. And so for us, there's a certain thoughtfulness of that synergy of what I call kind of that full stack engineering. From, we're designing the boards on the electrical side to we're designing the pixels in the iOS app and on the display. And there's this certain thoughtfulness around the whole experience and every little decision we make. And so if people ask me, like, why is a June oven better than any other cooking product? There's no one answer. There's no three answers. There's thousands of little decisions that we've made in thoughtfulness and software and hardware that have led to certain things. So like an example is on the hardware side, we decided to invest in carbon fiber heating elements, which are full power in 3 seconds, which that material's existed for a long time, but there hasn't been software to control that in a really interesting way. And so we're able to do all of our cook programs with no preheat because our carbon fiber heating elements are full power in 3 seconds, and we're able to control them with software in such a way that no one's ever been able to do in a big oven, in a toaster oven, in anything. And so there's lots and lots of little decisions of kind of that symphony between hardware and software that are all in service of a great user experience.
Excellent. And Kieran, you have even I'd say broader perspective because of you're currently at OpenPath. In the past, you worked with Wemo, Belkin Wemo. So different products, different connectivity challenges, and different service offerings. So how do you guys approach things when it comes to building a product and a service?
So I'll answer it in two ways. It's interesting because I'm actually, from a Wemo perspective, right between where Matt's perspective is and where Michelle's perspective is. Wemo is both a platform where IoT brands can be enabled, and then it's also single product use cases. So, for instance, the Wemo Smart Plug, which was very interesting, is we were looking at the usage as people named their devices plugged into the plug. By far, the overwhelming majority were actually lighting devices, table lamps. And so that led Wemo to develop the next product, which was a light switch, because lighting was one of the most desired use cases that people really enjoyed when they were thinking about these experiences coming to life. The platform itself is a way, it's the on-ramp, right? It's the on-ramp to bring these devices quickly to market. And then also with software to continue those experiences to become more immersive. And so in the Wemo world, that's how Wemo thought about it. There was some sensing technology that the Wemo team owned in the water, gas, and power space. Because the use cases were radically different, we actually created another brand called Phyn, Phyn, which has a smart sensing meter for water, both on the exterior of the home, where you can have it professionally installed, because it also includes a smart valve. It can detect and sense if there's going to be a catastrophic incident, and it can turn off the water before the incident actually happens. That's really cool, right? But that's quite very, very different use cases than, oh, you just put in a plug and you can plug anything into it and manage it. So you got to be, back to Matt's point, you got to be very, very thoughtful about what the experiences are that you're creating, how those experiences live with other experiences. Some you might know today, others you definitely do not know, right? Who would ever thought when we were creating Wemo that you would be able to voice activate it, right? So the very first Wemo plug that's out there is now voice activated. So that's something that someone bought and didn't have to pay for any of these new experiences that came to market. So that's thrilling, right? That it keeps growing with you. Now, switching gears on the OpenPath side, where we're classified in the B2B space, we're an access control company, which if you think about, what could be more boring than access control, right? But actually, because the industry itself has led itself into a very kind of non-innovative path, OpenPath was really able to come in and be totally disruptive in creating a platform and a product experience that allowed people to be very they enjoyed it. Like, who would ever thought you could just wave to unlock and in you go, right? You don't have to take your phone out of your pocket. You don't have to worry about anything. And there's all these other experiences to come about it. So, but it's very different because how it plugs into the building management system, how it integrates via cloud with all these other experiences. So, if you come in the morning when we're pre-COVID and your meeting was like at 7 a.m., and we would know that, okay, Michelle has a meeting at 7 a.m. She's actually got 2 guests coming who we can send a guest link via text or via email. So they're not waiting outside the door for Michelle to let them in. And by the way, we know Michelle has a Zoom ready to go, so we can power up Zoom so we're not spending the first 10 minutes trying to figure out how to get Zoom going. So those are the ways that we think about it. What else can we do to make your day frictionless? That's what IoT is about. It's about frictionless, about letting people live in this, be very serendipitous, right? Live in the moment.
Yeah, that's a great point. And Stacey and I often talk about how IoT really takes the context and smarts and turns things invisible, essentially, just makes them happen, So that's great. I want to touch upon a point that kind of came up here. You think about, for products, what services will go with those products. I wonder if you guys can share any examples of perhaps how you handle thinking about a service that maybe customers don't even know that they want yet. And maybe Finn was one of those. I don't know. I'm sure you can all have certain examples. Yeah. And how hard is it to plan for that? Because planning for a service that you don't even know, or even know if it might even be something that people want, how do you plan for that?
So I'll jump in since you mentioned Finn. Absolutely. So there's 2 parts of that. The problem with leaks, most people don't know, and we did a lot of research when we were at Finn. About 1/3 of all homes have a steady leak, right? So if you look at how many gallons a year that leak is worth per home, you multiply it by the number of homes, very quickly, right? Water has become one of our most precious resources. So already there's a way that you can have an environmental impact in a very positive way. Secondly, the top 2 claims from a dollar standpoint for insurance companies is actually water damage. So if we're able to reduce that by 2/3, can you imagine the economic value added in that case as well? So depending on the different constituents, you are appealing to their most basic need. And so with Finn, it's, helping. There's a lot of trial, right? You got to train the engine. You got to be able to recognize what the signals are and so forth. So you've got to really train it and tune it. So that does take time. It took a couple of years. But that in itself is, we talk about fidelity of data. Sometimes we talk about a smart city. You can have too much data that can populate all of the insights or not make the right insights. So sometimes starting small at the home level and then gradually come back may be a more powerful way to think about it.
Matt,
I have a.
Go ahead, Michelle, please.
I just got a couple of ideas on that too. So, I think it comes down to, when you're making these products, there are 2 value propositions that are really important to consumers. One is, can you save me money? And that, like, if there's a way, like with Finn, right, if you have a leak in your home, it's incredibly expensive. It can be in the tens of thousands of dollars, right? So that, very clear value there. And the other is, can you make me safe? Can you keep my family safe, right? Those are when I look at IoT, it's about the frictionless experience, but the thing that a lot of times becomes a value to consumers is keep my family safe, help me save money. And I think one peace of mind. And I think one of the things that I found really interesting, we have Ratio sprinklers. And we kind of got it because we have a decent sized yard, and I knew it would just be easier to test our sprinkler setup with a Rachio. What I didn't count on is the money we would save, because it's tied into the weather, and it can predict when rain is coming, right? And Karen, like you said, water is a precious commodity, and it's also expensive. And so that's just one of those kind of intangible benefits that came up from that. And then, like, who would have thought anybody would need a connected smoke detector? Seriously, like, who would think of that, right? But if you have one, and you have your smoke alarm go off at your home and you're not home, the peace of mind of that is incredible, because you can be able to go in and see. And with Nest Protect, that kicks the cameras on, and you can actually, if you have cameras in your house, you can see what's going on. And that peace of mind, and then the ability to act on something if there really is an emergency, even though you're not home, is really, really powerful. So I think that those are just a couple of examples of how services, as we think about them, built on top of these core devices, can do so much more. And the people who are thinking of them, I mean, a core value proposition of Rachio is that we'll save you money by not having to run your sprinklers all the time. But you typically don't think about sprinklers that way, right? So just a couple of examples I thought of.
Yeah, plus it's just smarter and better for the environment and so on. It's not wasteful. And the smoke alarm part that you brought up, Michelle, is actually interesting, because if you've got a connected smoke alarm, it is actually easier to see and smoke with red light. So if you have colored lights in your home, you could actually have an automation so that you could see if you are at home and there's a fire, God forbid. So there's so much benefit there. So Matt, I know you guys have added something during the recent pandemic, and I'm curious how that service, what made you think of the service to add to the June oven, and how you did it.
So the best feature of the June is it's always getting better. So when we launched originally, you could just bake, toast, roast, and broil. That was it. And we're literally able to build new appliances and software. So since then, we've launched an air fryer, a dehydrator, etc. We love that kind of surprise and delight to our customers of like, oh, you woke up on a Tuesday morning and we've gifted you a new appliance in software. There's something really magical about that. And we just launched with our latest release a dough proofing app. And so as bread baking has been a growing trend with people spending a lot more time at home, we were able to launch that proofing feature during the pandemic, which has been quite popular. And it's really, really magical to be able to see all the members of our community and our Facebook group, people emailing support, saying like, wow, thank you for this, especially as it's getting really hot in certain states across the country, where proofing really, really matters to get that precision temperature control that we're able to have within the June. Our community has been very, very thankful that we pushed out that update very recently.
Yes, I'm part of the sourdough starter club myself, so I appreciate it. I can tell you that. So I don't want to get too much into hardware, but just a discussion of additional services. Have you all faced any challenges where you want to add a new service, but your current hardware line that's available to consumers or businesses just can't quite support it? What do you do with those ideas? Do you just table those for a next revision, or do you keep at it and see how you can maybe make it work? I don't know if you've had any experiences like that you could share.
I can tell you about a recent experience we've had, which was a little bit about, driven by the onslaught of the pandemic. We had featured in our marketing communications the ability where you can just stroll up to the door and you don't need a key card, you just have your device in your pocket, but you could just kind of literally touch your hand on the reader and in you go, right? Of course, with the pandemic, that's the last thing you want to be doing. So the nice thing is we have capacitive sensors in the readers. They're off-the-shelf capacitive sensors, but we built our own firmware to power it. So that's something that, when we're looking back, that was the right decision, because it allowed us to tune that firmware, and now we allow people to wave their hand a few inches in front of it. You never have to touch it. We rolled that out over a weekend. So that's an example of a very reactive way within the current hardware software construct we could do something. There are definitely things that we know that we want to do that require a hardware release that's got some other built-in networking capabilities and communication capabilities, like 5G is an example. that's going to kind of open up different ways that people might be able to use these devices and so forth, at least even from an install standpoint. So there are definitely things with some of these newer technologies that allow us to do even more.
Yeah, I think we spend a lot of time figuring out how much we can do in software. I mean, we have devices that have been out there. I think the thermostat's been out there for 6-7 years now. And even if you look at the Google Home Mini, the original Minis, and the original Google Home devices, those are several years old now. A lot of the new innovation that we've done actually happens in software on the cloud. The newer devices that we have, we're trying to do more things locally on the devices. So we've beefed up the actual hardware in them, but we still have to keep all the capabilities up on the millions of devices that are out there in market, and upgrade them all together. And so that really forces us to do more of it in software, push more of the compute to the cloud. It's something that we are constantly thinking about when we build hardware devices, because we've just seen this where we know that the capabilities are going to be compounded over the next several years, and we've got to build in that flexibility in the platform without adding too much capability on the device. Otherwise, we price the devices out of the market, right? So you've just got that constant struggle of cost and BOM cost versus how much power I can put on the device to ensure its longevity.
Yeah, and that actually leads me to think about subscriptions. And I know we've got a couple of questions from the audience, just general about how to deal with obsolescence and business model changes. Because recently, Stacy and I reported on several companies that make IoT products, mostly smart home products, that have had to change their entire business model from pay once for the hardware and you're good forever to now, well, to keep things going, we need a subscription plan, or changes in perhaps a service. Somebody lost a service partner, and now they're going to have to charge for something that used to be free. How do you all deal with that? That's something you can't necessarily always plan for.
I can take that one. So I think that there's a massive challenge in consumers' minds of convincing people what's worth paying for on a monthly basis. And so not to put Google or Alexa on the spot here, but people think that these services should be free and don't cost anything, right? I wish I could see Google Home's cloud bill. I wish I could see Alexa's cloud bill that they are not passing through to the customers for a monthly service, right? I see my cloud bill and I don't have a Google business behind me or an Amazon business behind me to fund that. Mm-hmm. And also hardware is expensive. We're trying to come to the market with a reasonably priced product that's connected. The entry level price point for a June oven now is $499. And so I have to figure out how to pay that cloud bill forever and keep making services better. When everyone just got that dough proofing program, like I had to send us over the air software update through the cloud. Right, and we didn't charge people an upgrade for that. So we do have a subscription service right now. It's $499, and our retention is fabulous. People that do sign up love the service and love the interactive guided walkthrough recipes, etc. But it's still a challenge. Like we were discussing this recently in a meeting. They're like, okay, we're adding some new services because right now we do a time lapse video of your food that you can share on Instagram, Facebook, etc., which is a really, really cool experience. But at the same time, it's cloud intensive, right? And so should we say like, hey, we'll give you 5 gigs of storage? Like that's something people are used to, paying for. But does that make sense? You already bought it up with a camera in it. You weren't thinking about paying Dropbox style storage now. So anyway, so I think a big challenge is the different business models. And for a small company like us people just expect the cloud services to be free because big companies are subsidizing them. And it's a massive challenge for us. And so the challenge to me is, how do I create something that's worth paying for? And how do we constantly add value to our customers beyond an oven? A countertop oven, we're very expensive for a countertop oven. You buy a perfectly good toaster for $50. But how do we create this elevated service and experience just on hardware, but then how do we elevate that with a subscription service that is worth paying for? And that's something that we think about a lot.
Kieran, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was gonna say, you see this a lot, Kevin, in IoT, where I see a lot of our ecosystem partners that are moving towards trying just what you're talking about, Matt. How do I start to put a services business on top of my core hardware business, right? Whether it's security services, things like that. And I think it is more of a trend, because in order to be able to continue to cover things like your cloud costs, right? You want to be able to create that long-term relationship with the customer. So it's not, I bought a smart plug, and Kieran, I'm sure you've got thoughts on this, right? I bought a smart plug and I'm done. No, you want to build that brand relationship and that long-term relationship. Much easier with the June oven, I think, because of the ongoing capabilities that you guys have built in. But depending on the device, I don't necessarily have a relationship with my light bulbs unless they can do more for me. And so you see more and more of these companies trying to figure out, what is that model? What is that value add in terms of a service I can build on? Home security, though, seems to be a place that a lot of in the consumer space, a lot of our partners are moving towards as well, by providing security monitoring services.
It's interesting when you think about in the consumer side. People don't realize this, but Apple really has created hardware, software as a service. Well, hardware as a service. When you buy an iPhone, people have the opportunity to either you can pay up front or you can pay monthly, because you're going to get a replacement and a warranty that goes with it. People don't realize that is a subscription service, right? You can renew it, upgrade it after a year. So Apple's already started to do it, which is quite interesting, but people don't really realize it or see it in that way, because it's back to peace of mind. If I drop it, I can replace it. There's a warranty comes with it. So, and by the way, I'm not stuck with the device. That's the other thing, the FOMO, right? Fear of missing out when there's a new device release. They want to be part of that experience. So Apple's kind of addressed it in that manner. It's very interesting at OpenPath. The OpenPath product itself, historically, in the legacy world, has always dealt with physical security, facilities, and so forth. But because we're cloud-based and mobile, more and more IT, IS departments are involved, because we enable all these other great experiences. They're very comfortable with cloud-based platforms, right? That's the core of who they are. And so, and in some cases, people think that we're underpricing our services because of the value that we bring. So we're in a good situation on the B2B side, because people totally recognize the value that's ascribed to the platform.
Yeah, actually, Kieran, I was curious, you have the experience from both an enterprise and a consumer standpoint. So can you share the differences there? I mean, obviously, with consumers, it's more of a individual kind of relationship as opposed to a relationship with, say, a company that's buying services. But, how does that add challenges or make things easier?
Great question, because one would think that is the case, but actually it is very similar if you really stay very laser focused on the user experience, right? At OpenPath, employees are the users. The economic buyers are corporate functional groups. But so when OpenPath was created, it was because people kept losing their key cards. They didn't know where it was. They're actually very unsecure. And so OpenPath, the genesis was the founders, their last company was acquired by Verizon. On the first day of the job, they got one key card. Then the next day, they got a key card for the data center, because it was a data company, Edgecast. And, over a period of time, after about 3 months at all the different buildings, they actually had a little mini backpack of key cards that they're going around. They didn't know what worked where. And they go, everyone's got one of these in their pocket. And that was genesis for OpenPath. It was back to solving the user experience, which is exactly the same with Wemo, right? What's the individual user experience that we're creating? And then if you get that right, everything else drops into place, because the admin experience, right? The flexibility where they can create the dashboard, they can use their mobile device to do it rather than have to be in front of a laptop. All those things all naturally flow from solving the user experience at every step along the way. So we always use, working through complexity to get to simplicity. If you do that for every single user, you've solved a very, very nice user experience.
I would agree. I said I wasn't going to ask about hardware, but I have to just once, because I think, again, the diversity of the people on stage here will have.
And it's not the Champions Cup, right?
No. Yeah, I'm not missing a match, I don't think, right now. So another thing that Stacey and I discuss a lot, and we get a lot of questions on the podcast about this, are some of the new development boards of chips and radios and so on. And I suspect that if I throw this question out to you guys, it will be a very different answer. How much of those products do you actually maybe look at developing in-house versus going to get a development board? I know Michelle, I know Google has like development boards where you can, add Google services to just about any product and such. So I actually want to start with Matt on this one, but please, Kieran and Michelle, jump in afterwards if you could.
So for us, we obviously start with reference designs, and then we figure out what are the most important things that we need to add on to create the ideal experience for June Oven. I'll give an example. So kind of one of the things you talked about was limitations in hardware as software is getting better. So we've actually always overinvested in hardware and compute power. So on the original June Oven, which I believe you and Stacey both have, which we announced in 2015, so 6 years ago, we announced that product. Right, that product has a 2.3 gigahertz quad-core NVIDIA TK1 on it, and it's a very expensive computer that we built into our pricing. The first product was $1,500 of the first June Oven, but we were not using all that compute power in the beginning, but we knew we would want to, and so there was this certain thoughtfulness of the future and the future that we wanted to create, where we could have saved a lot of money by investing in some kind of the cheapest Android technology at the time, but we wanted to invest in machine intelligence. We wanted to be able to upgrade and elevate our experience, and so that was a very deliberate decision that we made, and we continue to make decisions like that because we do want to make the product better and better over time and not be stunted by our hardware. And when you make a bet like that, you're making a bet on that hardware. In a small company like June, that's like a 6-year bet at least before we're able to start thinking about, okay, what's the next generation of chipset and compute power going to look like? And so it's a very deliberate decision that, again, that cost has to get passed along to our customers. And so they might not be using that full compute power in the beginning, but we believe fundamentally that it's worth it. And that's a big part of our DNA.
Anyone else?
Obviously Google's got some chip development underway, and I think it mirrors what Matt said, right? I'm not by any means the expert in what we're doing in those places, but I think when we look at a problem that we think we can uniquely solve, and that is a little bit it's something that's right in our area of expertise, and it might be leaning into AI and how to do perhaps more efficient ML in a device. So it's very specific, and we think really hard about what is it that we need to do uniquely that other leading chip makers on the market aren't necessarily thinking about. It's not necessarily the thing that they need. It's not the problem that they're solving for that we need to solve for. Then we lean into being able to develop our own chips. It's not something that I would say in general. When we can work with the chip makers to develop what we need to meet the standards for our products, that's where we go. So it tends to be a little bit more specialized in terms of our development path.
And for us at OpenPath, we design all of our own boards. Now, a lot of the stuff is obviously off the shelf, but where our expertise, even though we sell hardware is a mechanism to deliver the software experience. We really are a software company. That's where all of our resources go. And so that's, Matt was talking about, thinking about the future and designing for the future. We talk about future proofing, right? We talk about, you're not stuck. It's not a one and done. You grow with us. And that's what, anyone wants, right? They don't want to ever feel like they're stuck and they can't evolve. Like as an example, which is one of the sides of, potentially the downsides of the pandemic, some companies are reducing their office space, right? And they're trying to sublease. If you have a legacy access control company, that's very, very hard to do because you kind of have to break half it off and let somebody else design, install their own. With us, we pretty quickly, via software within the dashboard, gave the master tenant, the ability to carve off for a subleaf. So you have a sub-org, that's a subset that they can manage, and they can give all their own credentials and so forth there. So that's a way we've future-proofed in a way that we may have not thought of before, where people are downsizing, or they're changing. They're having many more mini campuses as opposed to one big one, because people are getting more dispersed regionally around the country. So those are flexibilities that are built in.
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. It's a challenge. It's interesting how you all approach this in different ways based on what you do and the companies that you're at. So let's see. I think we might have one more time for one more question.
I have one thing, if you don't mind, just jump in real quickly about the user experience. I always say, a lot of people think about creating a user experience. I always say, flip the telescope, look through the other end, so you're getting very micro, and start to work back from that. I think that's really important. And one last thing, Matt and Michelle, I'm not a great cook. I burn anything. So if you guys can do a co-marketing program with Nest Protect and June Oven, I will buy that package in a heartbeat. Or maybe, Matt, you should embed Nest Protect in the June Oven. I'm sure you have some capabilities. But anyway, just putting that out there.
Wonderful. All right, let me see if I can sneak one more question in from our audience. After disregarding security issues, we know security is its own challenge. What do you find to be the most challenging issue, either confronting your organizations or the consumer who buys products and services from you?
Well,
I guess you guys aren't challenged.
Well, it depends on what area you're looking at. Obviously, sure. Talent, and everyone's looking. Engineering talent is real precious. And so that's all talent is precious, but even more so with engineering. So the talent side, we've got a quite advanced roadmap, and resources which end up being knowledge workers are the way to make accelerate that roadmap. So talent, and then a lot of strategy is about knowing who you are and who you're not, and saying no to the right things and yes to things that are really going to help build a long-term vision for the platform. So that's very important as well. I think that's what each day you have to continually do, is make sure that you really are focused on the long game.
I'll chime in, and actually I concur with you, Kieran, because talent is a really tough problem. But when I look outward at the consumer smart home space, I think our biggest challenges today are really around, the underlying platforms for IoT, for smart home IoT, are really kind of a mess today, and it's really hard for consumers. Super hard for consumers. I've gone to like Home Depot and Lowe's, and I watched consumers go up and try to figure out what smart light to buy, and literally pick them up, and they see this like whole range of protocol logos on the back, Z-Wave and Zigbee, and they have no idea what this is, and they put the box back up on the shelf. Or then they get them home, and maybe they've got a Wemo plug at home, and now they've bought somebody else's light bulb. Those things don't set up the same way at all. And if you're not technical, you're like, but wait a minute, this thing had a QR code, and now this thing wants me to hold my phone 6 centimeters from my light bulb in order for it to pair. These are fundamental issues with smart home in the consumer space that we have to solve. And those are, they're industry-wide issues. Project Chip is looking at trying to solve those fundamental issues. But I really think that as slick as a lot of our devices are today, until we can solve a lot of those foundational issues for a smart home, it's going to be hard to drive that mainstream adoption.
Yeah, automatic pairing for sure. Totally agree. Yep.
Setup is a big deal.
Matt, any challenges you want to share?
Everything. Hardware is hard. Software is hard. My last company, which I was the founder of, like we made an iOS app and an Android app, and we were like, this is so hard. And now we're Nikhil and I met, and now we have a full stack company with the same team size. So I think we have 15 different organizations within our software team, and our company size is only 50 people.
Wow.
And for us, June is also a platform with our technology partners. So we shipped our first grill with Weber. So the Weber Smokefire, which is now shipping now, is powered by June OS, June OS Lite, which is, think of that as like the black and white embedded version of June. Nice. And so it's there's challenges all around.
They don't call it work for nothing.
This is true. Well, we're not going to solve them all here today, and unfortunately, we are out of time. So I want to thank Matt, Kieran, and Michelle. This was fantastic. I hope the audience enjoyed this as much as I did. And I'm going to hand this back over to Stacy now, and she's going to take you through to what's next.